Today we're going to be doing a video on how to do shrink wrap temporary veneers. For this case, we're going to use a patient who's actually a staff member of mine who wants to do her front two teeth. She's had bonding before, it keeps chipping and breaking. She has a history of some enamel fractures in that area, and she just wants a more permanent, or at least a longer lasting solution, so we decided to do veneers on her. So here you can see the preoperative pictures. And before we can actually begin the process, we have to take a preliminary impression. So if you can notice on this impression, we used the heavy body and the light body material, but the handle didn't quite line up with 8 and 9. It didn't line up with the centrals. So when I go to try to place that in the mouth later, when I'm trying to get it positioned, I found in the past if I don't have some kind of marking on there, it makes it difficult. So I put a little mark with a pen. You can use a Sharpie, you can use a ballpoint pen, either way, it doesn't matter, but that just indicates right where the centrals are. So when I go to put that in place, which you'll see later on in the video, it just snaps right into place, and there's no guesswork involved with that. I found that to be a quick little tip and trick that makes it work out so much better. So now that we have the impression, it's time to actually prep the teeth. And so when I do my preps, I go ahead and reduce the facial, the incisal, and actually go through the interproximals to create space for the porcelain to work all the way to the back. So there they are, there are the preps. Now it's time to start making the temporaries. I'm going to go ahead and place etch on these teeth because we're going to bond these temporaries into place. So I'm going to put this blue etch on about, let's say 80-90% of the tooth structure or the prep surface, but I'm not going to carry it up to the margins. I want to leave that area alone. I don't want to put the bonding agent, I don't want to put the blue etch in that area. So just like any kind of bonding of composite procedure, we're going to let the etch set there for about 10 seconds or so. Rinse it off. If you notice, I kind of rinse from the gum line down towards the incisal edge. It just kind of further keeps that etch away from that area. Isolate the area with some cotton rolls. And now we're ready to go through our bonding steps. Before I do any of my bonding, of course, make sure the teeth are dry. And then I'm going to paint a glutaraldehyde-based desensitizer antiseptic agent, and this is Microprime by Danville Engineering. And you just kind of apply it liberally across the surface, and then we just air thin that or dry it off. So now we have a nice clean surface to go to the next step. The next step is actually applying the primer and bond, the adhesive agent, and putting that across the teeth. And I'm going to again be covering up pretty much where the etch went. I'm going to go all the way around, but kind of stay away from getting too much onto the margin. And you'll see here when I dry it, I'm going to dry it from the gum line down to the incisal, not allowing it to really pool or even get close to the margin. Cure the surface, and after it's cured, we now have a light activated surface. So now we put our bisque acrylic material against that light activated surface. It is going to be a very tight fit. Those temporaries do not come off. So here's the bisque acrylic. We're going to put it inside the preliminary impression. When putting this in, I always make sure that the tip is down inside the incisal area of that impression, and I'm going to work it across real smooth, nothing fast, and I'm going to keep the tip submerged. I don't want any air bubbles to be incorporated. So now you can see it going into place. Again, that little mark with that pen allows it to line up, and snap, it goes right into position. So there it is. We're going to let it set for 3 minutes. The material typically takes 2 minutes, but when I'm doing these, I'm going to let it set an extra minute just to verify that it's completely set. And now when we remove the preliminary impression, you can see the temporaries. They are in place. They look pretty good. The shape is there. The general outline, it looks really good. There is some excess, as you'll see, some flash that's up on the gum line and up on the other teeth as well. Here's a still photo showing how much or how thin it is. It does kind of cover a wide area, but it's very thin material, and it just kind of peels right off. There it is on the lingual. You can see some of that is kind of worked its way up along the palate as well. So now it's time to start removing that. Now I'm not going to actually pull it away from the gum line. I'm not going to try to pull it down because I don't want any of that temporary material to actually peel or lift off of the prep along the margin. So instead I'm going to take a flame-shaped finishing burr and just paint stroke along the gum line. I'll tuck a little bit into the margins or into the embrasures, and I'll get to that later. I'm not in any, there's no concern of actually damaging the margin during this part. I should note at this point in the video, I am not running the burr as I'm lifting this off of the gum tissue. The burr is stopped. I'm just using that instrument to help peel off the excess. I use a football finishing burr to go in and do the lingual side to remove the flash that's extended beyond the margin, and just kind of go right along where the margin is, real light, real gentle, just getting the excess off, and it leaves a nice, clean, smooth finish line. And then just go in with whatever material or whatever instrument of choice to remove the material that's up on the soft tissue, but also on the neighboring teeth and even on the unprepped part, which you can see on 8 and 9, there's some material actually stuck along that gingival part of the tooth itself. And go ahead and run it across all the teeth. Even though they may appear to look like they have nothing on them, there is almost always going to be some material that's going to extend a few teeth back on either side. So we just got to be meticulous in scraping all of this off. So at this point, again, we've kind of cleaned off around the gum line and we cleaned off the excess. Now it's time to open up the interproximal areas. You can't fit floss in there right now because that material is kind of is pretty tight up against the neighboring teeth. So I'm going to use a serrated ribbon. This is almost like a little hacksaw. And we go in between, and I'm going to favor the unprepped tooth in this case. I'm going to not be trying to go straight up. I'm going to actually favor the unprepped tooth, because if I end up erring on any side, if I go towards the actual bisacrylic temporary material, I may actually start cutting into it and leave gouge it out, and then I'm going to have a gap. So it does take quite a bit of work. As you can tell, we're putting some force on that, but we are working our way gently but slowly all the way up along the gum line. And once we've kind of cleared that interproximal contact, we can finally put in the floss and get out the debris. And of course, we will have done the same thing on the other side. One of the last steps I'm going to do is actually open up the gingival embrasures. I'm again going back to the the flame-shaped finishing burr. I'm going to be going around and kind of opening it up. I kind of allow the gums to breathe, if you will, underneath that temporary. If anything, I'm going to err on taking away a little bit too much. I would rather there be space, not creating a dark triangle, but just trying to create enough space for that gum tissue to relax into the proper gingival embrasure. If you leave it pressed, the material pressed up against the gums, it's going to be very inflamed when they come back to actually try in the finals. Go through your normal steps of checking the occlusion, of course your regular occlusal bite, as well as your excursive movements, and removing any kind of gliding or hitting on that temporary. I find that the distal and incisal corners are the most notorious for breaking, so we'll make sure there's absolutely no contact there, and minimal, if any, contact on any of the temporary material. And so when we're got that squared away, it's time to move on to the next step, which is to, and this is just an option for the patient. The gums are bleeding at this point. Instead of sending the patient out with bleeding gums, why don't we go ahead and put some kind of styptic agent on there. This is Cutrol. I think it's a ferric sulfate. Anyways, I can use ferric sulfate, aluminum sulfate. It doesn't matter to me. I know there's some talk about which one to use, anterior versus posterior, and I've used both and haven't had a problem either way. And you can optionally go ahead and polish that up with whatever you use to polish up your composites. You can use that to put the final touches on this as well. And then if you need to use any kind of finishing disc to go work on any kind of incisal reshaping, feel free to do that. And here it is immediately afterwards. Gums, of course, they're a little irritated from the process of going through the cleanup stage, but they're together, 8 and 9. There's no space between there. They are actually in there all the way. 24 hours later, again, this is a staff person who took the pictures. It looks like those temporaries are too bright upon this close-up, but when you stand back and take a look at the smile, they blend right in. And those things are on there very, very tight. When the patient comes back to remove them, you can't just slip them off with a hemostat. I actually have to make vertical cuts. I usually put 2 vertical cuts, and then I make 1 horizontal cut, almost making it like an H shape. And then I'll go with some kind of flat blade instrument and actually pop the temporaries off. Then I end up having to take a burr at the very end and actually shave off any other remaining bonded on acrylic, bisacrylic, and even some of the bonding agent. That does add a little extra time to that step, but you're going to have a patient that's not going to have a hassle with their temporaries falling off. So that takes a little extra work, but I think it's worth it to have something that stays in place. So that is Shrink Wrap Temporary Veneers. Hopefully that was helpful. I look forward to your comments below. Thanks.